What's the most creative punishment your parents gave to you? My parents always made us repair things we broke. One day my sister and I were roughhousing and we accidentally made a hole on the wall. So my dad drove us to Home Depot and told us that we both had to figure out on our own how to fix the hole. We had to talk to the employees on our own, ask our own questions, gather repair items, select paint color, and bought a home repair magazine on our own. We then had to fix the hole on our own. We messed up a lot. It looked wonky and we picked the wrong paint color. We learned the value of taking care of our things. We realized how hard it was to fix things and we learned new skills. All this without yelling, punishment or lecture. I can honestly say my parents didn't give me any creative punishments. But I have a boy and a girl, now young adults. When they were little they were best friends. They also shared a bedroom and got along great. But when they would fight and it got ugly I would send them both to their room for 1 hour and told them they couldn't come out until they came up with a really good secret handshake. They would forget that they were mad at each other and start immediately working on a handshake. I would hear them laughing their heads off while they were doing it. They would come out an hour later show me this super long fun handshake, synchronized to the minute. I would congratulate them for their hard work and then they would go back to playing. It still brings a smile to my face. My mom pointed out to me that this wasn't really punishment. I told her I wasn't trying to punish them, I just wanted them to stop fighting, and it worked every time. If I slammed a door really hard when I was mad, my mom and grandparents would make me practice closing it nicely. I'd have to reopen and then close it gently about 50 times, counting each one out loud. If I closed it too hard I'd have to start over. At one point I learned to get my anger out by just slamming the door over and counting 1, 1, 1, 1. Until I wasn't mad enough to keep slamming the door. They didn't utilize it as much when I started doing that. After a late night out of underage heavy drinking, my father got me up at 5 a.m., decided it was a good time for us to clean the garage thoroughly. I did most of the work for 3 hours. Then he took me to breakfast and discussed the error of my ways, promising more 5 a.m. chores anytime it happened again. It didn't happen again. This is what my father did to me. My 18th birthday party, I held a bonfire and stayed blasted from sunup till sundown. Dragged myself home at 7 a.m. Well, we lived on a farm, meaning there was plenty to do. My dad gave me time to fall asleep and then came into my room, pulled me out of bed, and in a chipper voice said, "We've got a lot to get done today." He put me to feeding the cows, tending the garden, and cleaning the horse stables. It was a nightmare to do after being awake and drunk for the past 24 hours. Took 9 hours to get it all done. I didn't show up home drunk anymore after that. My dad once grounded both my sister and I. We were blaming each other when he decided to separate us. He came into my room and sat down on the bed before taking a deep breath and explaining that he knew my sister was the one to blame. He asked me how long I think he should ground her for. I said a couple of days. He then went to her room and told her the same thing. It was all my fault and he knew it. Asked her how long he should ground me for, and she said a month. So she got grounded for a month and I got grounded for a couple of days, because that's what punishment we each thought was appropriate. She stopped being such a spiteful bitch after that. I've been dying to tell this story. It wasn't me but my best friend and her brother, when they were younger, would not stop fighting. Their parents tried everything, taking their toys, early bedtime, grounding, can't see friends, etc. But they wouldn't stop. So one day their dad had the bright idea of putting them in the garage, sitting next to each other, while holding hands ... while watching paint dry on a canvas. And every time they said something rude to each other, he poured a little more paint over the canvas. They were there for 4 hours, but they stopped fighting. So ... success? When I thought I was big and tough, after getting into an argument with my father, I told him that I didn't need him anymore. He simply goes downstairs and shuts off the power to my room. After hours of being stubborn and hot-headed, mind you, it was the middle of summer and I lived in the attic, I finally caved. I've never said anything like that to him ever again. As a little kid I was being a shit and told my mom I wish she was gone or something, and she packed a suitcase and went to the door and was going to leave, all while I'm sobbing for her to stay. Mom was brutal that round. I love you mom, never leave. When I was younger and habitually not doing my chores on summer vacation while my mom was at work, she just started taking the fuse to my room and the living room with her. So my options were either vacuum and wash the dishes, or unplug everything and haul them to another room. Not me, but I had a coworker whose son was 13 and had all the hallmarks of sulky teen. Her favorite punishment was making him sit next to her on the couch for a couple of hours while she did all of the best mom things, hugging him, making bad jokes, etc. This was only for mild infractions, and from what I heard he was a pretty good kid who didn't get in major trouble. But she thought this punishment was hilarious and I had to agree. Punish by smothering with mom love, a teenager's worst nightmare. I was 17 and had a good relationship with my dad. I was going to be late getting to an event and he told me, "Drive safely and don't drive over the speed limit." I said, "Trust me." 30 minutes later, I was pulled over on the side of the highway after driving more than 40 kilometers per hour over the speed limit. What I didn't know was that the police officer had phoned my dad and asked if I was allowed to drive the car, insured in my dad's name. When I got home 5 hours later, there was a note on my bedroom door, "Trust." What does that mean? I turned over the keys the next morning and asked how long my punishment would last. Dad said, "What punishment?" I felt horribly guilty for breaking trust, and the lack of punishment made me feel worse. I drove more carefully and slowly and worked so hard to regain his trust. As a parent, now, I look back on that and emulate the relationship we had with my own children. School bored me, so I'd often ditch and spend the day at bookstores, museums, or tagging along with an older sibling to sit in on his lecture hall classes at college. I got suspended a week for ditching. That's some logic to prohibit me from going to school I was ditching, so my parents provided me as free lawn care for an entire month to an elderly neighbor. If I didn't do it, no allowance, so I did it. She was a nice lady anyway. After the punishment month was over, he gave me a list of other neighbors who would pay me to take care of their lawns. Turns out Dad was going around the neighborhood talking to all of our other neighbors about what a good job I was doing for her. When I wanted to stop mowing lawns to get a real job in fast food like my friends, he had me figure out my hourly take-home versus making minimum wage. I learned that I was making 5 times the amount they were per hour. Talk about opening my eyes to the entrepreneurial way. And since I was earning plenty of my own money, Dad no longer gave me an allowance, which I suspect was his plan all along. Well played, Father, well played. Not for me but for my younger brother. Got suspended from school. Can't remember the exact reason, but it led to a huge argument between him and my mom. He ended up shouting at her about how much he hated her and hating living here, and that even jail would be better than this. So my parents took out every piece of furniture and every item from his room aside from his bed. He had to sit in there for 5 days, with nothing to entertain himself with. Was allowed out 4 times a day to use the toilet. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner was decided by Mom and put outside his door. He apologized quickly, but Mom stuck to her decision. After the 5 days, he never complained about living here ever again. I was in 3rd grade, got in trouble at school and was suspended for 3 days. In the past my mom would have just spanked me, put me on punishment at home, i.e., no TV, extra chores, etc. But since spankings didn't really work for me, she got creative and decided to have me come to work with her all 3 days of my suspension. She worked at a community center. While at work with her, I had to work on some math and reading workbooks, handwrite an apology letter to my teacher for being bad, which she would proofread, edit and make me rewrite correctly. And worst of all, I had to practice my piano lessons in the staff lounge as her coworkers were coming in and out throughout the day getting coffee or eating lunch. It was pure torture. One time I broke a couch while roughhousing with friends. My punishment was having to be responsible for getting it repaired. I had to provide 3 quotes from different repair shops, and include a pros and cons list to consider alongside the price, such as which company would pick the couch up and which one required it to be delivered, and then I had to cover the costs myself. My parents had some odd jobs around the house that they had been planning on paying someone to do, like doing repair work around the house or painting all the exterior doors, window frames, shed and garage, so they gave me an opportunity to put a bid in on them, which required me to make a budget for supplies, provide a time estimate, and to make a pitch presentation. I ended up winning the bid for the painting job by undercutting the companies I knew they had already gotten quotes from. My bid was $150 below the next lowest quote they received, and $100 above the quoted cost for the repair to the couch, and included enough to pay a couple friends to help me. If the couch repair came in on budget, I would also pocket a small amount, but not quite as much as I was paying my buddies. In the end, the couch repair ended up much below the quoted amount. It was a leather reclining couch, and the original quote included replacing the reclining mechanism, but in the end they were able to repair the damaged mechanism and only had to replace a single panel of leather. I was able to double the rate I was paying my buddies and pay myself the same amount. It was about a month out from my birthday and I really wanted to know what I was getting. I kept harassing my mom to give me some sort of hint, like over-the-top begging. My mom stood up, walked out of the house to the garage, came back in and tossed me my present, which was a copy of Space Jam on VHS. She said, "Here, have fun opening no presents on your birthday." I was immediately incredibly disappointed that I had just ruined my own birthday, and from that day on never wanted to find out what presents I got. I did get more stuff than just that for my birthday, but it was one of the big presents and made the day feel more hollow. My brother and I used to bicker. It was never anything that turned physical, but we'd snipe at each other constantly with insults and complaining. Mom and Dad finally had enough, so they made us stand side by side with our non-dominant hands. I'm a righty, he's a lefty, and tied us together. We were then told to clean the kitchen after dinner. It was difficult, but we were laughing about it by the time everything was clean. We still tease each other, but it's never malicious anymore. Tilda. As kids, we were spanked for disobeying. Eventually, swats on the butt don't hurt enough to be corrective, so Dad moved on to something more painful for a tween, the wallet. Every time we failed to take the trash out on time or cut the grass before it rained, we were fined $25. We were told it went into the vacation fund, so it wasn't like the money was gone from our lives. When I turned 18, Dad sat me down in his office, and handed me an envelope stuffed with bank statements. Turns out he was investing every one of those $25 fines into a mutual fund. I'm now 28, and it's still sitting there growing in case of a rainy day. I kinda regret not screwing up more as a kid. The account could have been bigger. My mom called it the Stone Age punishment, and it heckin' worked. She took away every piece of digital technology I owned, and each week with good grades I was able to earn back something, starting with my radio. I never remember music sounding as good as it did that day. My grades went up because I had nothing to do but my homework, and I became really creative because after homework there was nothing left to do but draw and write. Add to those that were punished similarly and that lead to maladaptive behavior and psychological issues. I'm so sorry. For context, I think it's important that I deserved it and that I knew it. I had been pretending to go to after-school homework help when really I went to go make out with my little boyfriend my mother didn't even know about. Also, my mother rarely punished me, so when she did it was only for the major F-ups that even I knew in my hormone-fueled 13-15-year-old brain were worthy of punishment, which gave the punishment an element of challenge to regain my privileges. At some point my parents did this when I was heavily relying on online contact with friends. First I used an old phone to stay in contact, but when I wasn't able to, my stupid head figured the most entertaining thing was cutting myself. Still weird to think back at how easily I just did that back then. When my parents found out, they kinda realized removing me from my social life wasn't great, and started trying to help me with things like my gaming addiction and self-hate instead of just punishing me. One time when I was 15, during the summer I used to party at an apartment complex that was full of college kids. I drank way too much and was severely drunk. My ride home never showed up and I was hours past curfew and my mom came to find me. She didn't say a word to me the whole way home. I was so very sick and never left the bathroom all night. My mom woke me up early, had me sit at the kitchen table, poured me a shot of tequila and said, "If you're going to drink with me." Just the smell sent me back to the bathroom, and I haven't drank tequila since. My dad did something like this to my cousin, only it was a series of shots, followed by vomiting, followed by cleaning out the doghouse the next morning. Years later, Dad offered me the same deal: if you want to drink, underage, same as your cousin, we'll do a line of shots, and after that, you can drink, no problems. Being smarter than my cousin, I said sure. But I want to do shots of tequila, so we both get sick. Never had to do the shot game with Dad. This was the day after prom. I had gone extra hard that night, so I was in pretty rough shape the next morning. My dad picked me up and instead of taking me home to die in peace, he drove to his brother's place. Where he was building a garage. My dad is an electrician. So I was tasked as being his apprentice and general gopher. This being late June, it was hot as fuck in that garage. No one there brought up the fact that I looked like, and felt like, shit. And likely reeked of alcohol. But they worked me like a dog. All day long. Climbing up ladders, pulling wire, carrying lumber, nailing shit together, the works. By the end of the day, I was an absolute mess. Soaked in sweat, pale, felt like I was literally dying. They finally decide to call it a day and break open the cooler of beer. My uncle cracks one open and hands it to me. I promptly barfed at the sight and smell of it. They all bust up laughing. They knew. Every single one of them knew. We were really poor growing up, but we had no comparison, so didn't realize it. Being a picky eater meant you went hungry. I once complained about something my mom cooked and my dad's response was that I wasn't eating at all the next day. I had water, but that's it. By late afternoon I was so hungry I snuck out my bedroom window and dug a carrot out of the garden and ate it, dirt and all, because I knew if I turned on the hose to wash it my Sam would hear. My folks relented and let me have dinner, always their plan. I never complained about food again. I still don't. Actually, if anyone cooks anything for me I'm so grateful. Later in life my mom admitted she knew about the sneaking and the carrot but figured it fit the lesson so let it slide. They never intended me to go to bed hungry, just more appreciative. It worked. That was my punishment, except they'd make me cook dinner then send me to bed hungry. My dad watched me the whole time to make sure I didn't sneak anything. I had a stash of food under the floorboards in my room for when they did this though. So when my daughter was little, time out was the go-to. Now that she's a teen, she's incredibly well behaved. The stuff she does now is more things she forgets that are annoying and inconvenience me, like putting small items in the disposal side of the sink, forcing me to have to fish them out. So I figured the consequences should fit the action. She annoyed and inconvenienced me, I shall do the same. I have stuck googly eyes on everything she owns. I meticulously cut out 100 pictures of Nick Cage's head in various sizes with various expressions and stuck them on all her stuff. I've covered both her windshields of her car with post-it notes that say I leave things in my pockets when washing them. She remembers the consequences and it entertains me. My teen girls would leave cups everywhere. I made a bunch of kitten pictures and told them whenever I see a cup a kitten dies and I would put an X on the photo. Oh, you killed a kitten. Definitely helped. When I first got my car, I made the mistake of driving home from a party drunk as fuck. My mom heard me stumble in and put me right to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a tow truck outside my house. My mom told me that because I couldn't be responsible or trusted with a car, she was selling it back to the dealership. I cried hysterically. They towed it away. After about a week of walking to school in the cold and rain, apologizing profusely, taking a safe driving course, and missing my car, my mom finally gave up and told me she didn't actually sell the car. She had it towed to my aunt's house and they stored it in the garage. My aunt lives a 10-minute walk from my house. My mom paid $75 to tow my car 7 blocks just to make a point. It worked. I've never taken my car or my mom for granted, nor have I ever driven under any influence ever again. She's a petty bitch, but damn if it didn't serve its point. We were driving home from somewhere towing an empty horse trailer and I was in the back seat being a really annoying teenager. I was acting hyper and my dad had a headache. Parents kept asking me to chill but I was getting a kick out of making everyone miserable, so I kept putting on my stand-up act or whatever dumb shit I thought was so funny. After like 30 minutes of this, my dad told me if I didn't shut up I was going to ride the rest of the way home in the horse trailer. I was like yeah right and said something smart-ass, so he pulled over, walked around and escorted me to the track room of the horse trailer where I sat in the dark the remaining 10 minutes of the drive home.